I watched the WWE Hall of Fame on Tuesday. For me, it was nearly ruined by the fake piped-in crowd chants. I thought that was completely unnecessary. I was fine with the idea of there being no actual fans, for a change. But I have no idea why they didn't have the wrestlers out in the audience like they usually do during these ceremonies. When they used to do these at the hotel banquet halls in the early years, they had limited fans there, but they had wrestlers. The wrestlers were at, the tables. They were in the audience, even back then. If they can't bring their families, yeah, I get that, but they were already there. The wrestlers were on the red carpet. They were giving interviews. Why not have them sitting out in the audience? I just don't understand that. So between that and the piped-in chants, it almost just completely took me out of the whole ceremony. Of all the inductees we saw, I thought RVD probably had the best speech. That was probably the speech, honestly, that I enjoyed the most. And this was not without controversy. During the 2020 induction ceremony, they honored the class of 2020 and the class of 2021. But during the 2020 induction ceremony, WWE announced Ray Stevens, Dr. Death Steve Williams, and Gary Hart among the names of their legacy inductees. That is definitely not the complete list. I thought I had the full list here. But in any event, those were the names that stood out to me. Dr. Death, should he have or could he have gotten a solo induction instead of just being lumped in as a legacy inductee? Of course. But if you look at their body of work, even Ray Stevens, Pat Patterson pushed so hard for Ray Stevens to go into the Hall of Fame when they were in California a few years ago. He and Ray Stevens, one of the best tag teams, very well known in that Bay Area, and Vince McMahon wouldn't do it. Jim Ross, for many years, pushed to have Danny Hodge put into the Hall of Fame. Vince McMahon would not do it. And now Hodge recently passed away. People try to figure out what goes on in the mind of Vince McMahon and why he makes the decisions he makes when it comes to these Hall of Fame inductees. There's no rhyme or reason for it. There's no sense in even trying to figure it out. So a guy like a Ray Stevens, Dr. Death, they all would be worthy of having standalone Hall of Fame inductions. But if WWE is not going to give them that, then this is as good as it gets. Then you lump them all in together. At least they get some recognition. For the 2021 class, we had Dick the Bruiser, Pez Whatley, Buzz Sawyer, Ethel Johnson, and Paul Bosch joining them in the legacy wing. Wonder how Bruce Pritchard feels about Paul Bosch being lumped in as a legacy inductee. I believe he came up in the business under Paul Bosch. He's a big fan of Paul Bosch. I'm sure if it were up to Bruce, he would have been giving the induction. And Paul Bosch would have gotten a full-on Hall of Fame induction, but that's not how it works. Kevin Dunn. Nobody will know who they are. We can't put them in the Hall of Fame because nobody will know who they are. That's how it goes. That's what happened. That's what happened when Jerry Lawler went in. Can't have Lance Russell. Nobody knows who he is. Sorry, Jerry. Let's go with William Shatner. The reason there was controversy is because it was noted that the footage that WWE used for Ethel Johnson, who's credited as the first black female wrestler, footage they aired was not Ethel Johnson. Footage they aired was of a woman named Sandy Parker, who's a completely different wrestler altogether. And Ethel Johnson's niece was not very happy about this. She tweeted her displeasure. She said, "Y'all need to fix this because if you're going to use my Aunt Ethel in the Hall of Fame, at least reach out to the family. And the video you used isn't her. Ethel Johnson was the first black champion ever. If you're going to represent her correctly." And that is almost as embarrassing as the Mets putting together a 50th anniversary tribute to their 1969 team and honoring all of the players that have since passed away, while including two people who are still very much alive in that tribute. It was news to them when they found out that they had died. And the Mets, I know they called at least one of them to apologize. I assume they called both people to apologize. Sorry, we thought you were dead. Now that was worse, because they actually thought these people had expired. But this reminded me of that, and I thought I would share that with all of you. One of the great marquee moments in Mets history. But yes, I don't know how something like this happens. This is what happens when you have people who work in the company who don't have a sense of wrestling history. And look, I didn't know anything about Ethel Johnson myself, but I wouldn't be the one putting together footage for her video package either. They need to have people who actually know what the fuck they're doing. If you're going to be putting together video packages for these legacy inductees and you have limited footage, you at least need to know that you're using the right footage. I wonder who they have in charge of doing this. Probably Kevin Dunn. Hey, we have footage of this African-American lady. She looks like an Ethel. We'll just put that in the video package. It's very embarrassing. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the death of Jack Veneno, who passed away on Tuesday at the age of 79 after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. He was best known for winning the NWA World Heavyweight Championship from Ric Flair in a match in the Dominican Republic back in 1982, which turned him into a cultural icon of sorts over there. I got to interview George Napolitano way back on Sound Off episode 182. I've gotten to know George quite well over the last 10 years. He's a great guy. I mean, George has been around. He has seen it all for decades. You think about every big WWE main event pay-per-view match over the years, WrestleManias, Royal Rumble, SummerSlams, Survivor Series. He's been there for most of them. He was ringside for the Montreal Screwjob. He didn't look like he knew what was going on. So George has been around for a very long time. And I asked him about this match between Ric Flair and Jack Veneno when I interviewed him. Because in Ric Flair's book, he name drops George. George has been friends with Flair for a number of years. Flair had no idea who his opponent was when he got there. And George was over there with him. He was there to cover the matches. And he calls Flair and he tells Flair, hey, look out your hotel window. And when Flair does, he goes, there's your opponent. And outside his window was Jack Veneno. He was jogging around with thousands of people, thousands of his fellow countrymen cheering him on. And he talked about how passionate and even dangerous things could be with the fans down there. And he was right in the middle of all of it, along with Flair. So you can hear him tell that story if you want, in his own words on episode 182. It's up in the archives. But Veneno was not supposed to win the championship. That's the interesting story here. It was supposed to go to a 60-minute draw. The fans, though, they were so hot for this match, Flair realized that if he had retained the title that night, he might not make it out of that building alive. He feared for his life. So he called an audible about 20 minutes into the match, and he told Veneno, hey, hit your finish and then lay on top of me and pin me. And when he won, the place, you could just imagine, the place came unglued. The title change was never acknowledged beyond that night. Flair ended up taking the belt back home with him. I believe in the Dominican Republic, they announced Veneno had been stripped of the title a few weeks later for not leaving the country to defend it. I think that was the excuse they gave. But to his people, he was the champion. He won the title. He pinned Ric Flair in the middle of the ring. He was the champion who never lost. And, you hear these stories, these old school wrestling stories, and you just have to appreciate how passionate these fans really were about pro wrestling and how much they believed. You hear stories like that about Puerto Rico as well. But if you're a heel and you're in the middle of all that, trying to make your way back to the locker room in one piece, and you've heard guys over the years, Harley Race, Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, they've all told war stories like this before. You're just trying to make it to the back. It's got to be just a terrifying experience. Wrestlers, they've had batteries thrown at them, urine thrown on them, they've been stabbed. You really did have to fight for your life